Sarah Martinez stepped into the briefing room at Fort Bragg, her boots clicking against the polished floor. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across rows of empty chairs that would soon fill with seasoned soldiers. At 26, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, revealing sharp eyes that missed nothing. The deployment to Afghanistan loomed just weeks away, and today marked her first meeting with Bravo Company. Sarah had spent the last 8 years climbing through military ranks, earning her place through grueling training and countless hours perfecting her skills. Yet she knew what awaited her in that room would be different from any challenge she had faced before. Captain Williams arrived first, a weathered man in his 40s with graying temples and tired eyes that had seen too much combat. He nodded politely but kept his distance, shuffling through paperwork with mechanical precision. Soon after, other team members filtered in, each casting curious glances at the new addition to their unit. Sergeant Morrison, a burly man with arms like tree trunks, made no effort to hide his skepticism. He had served 3 tours in Iraq and wore his experience like armor, believing that battlefield wisdom could not be taught in training facilities. His eyes narrowed as he sized up Sarah, taking note of her clean uniform and unmarked face. The room filled with the low murmur of conversations as more soldiers arrived. Martinez could feel their stares, some curious, others dismissive. She had encountered this reception before, but never with stakes this high. In just a few weeks, these men would need to trust her with their lives, and she would need to trust them with hers. Lieutenant Chen, a soft-spoken communications specialist, offered a genuine smile as he took his seat. Unlike the others, he seemed more interested in studying the mission briefings than sizing up his new teammate. His acceptance provided a small comfort in the sea of uncertain faces. The most vocal skeptic proved to be Corporal Jackson, whose southern drawl carried across the room as he shared his concerns with anyone willing to listen. He questioned whether someone without extensive combat experience belonged in their unit, especially someone who looked like she should be behind a desk rather than behind enemy lines. Martinez understood their hesitation. Most of these men had served together for years, developing the kind of trust that could mean the difference between life and death in combat situations. She represented an unknown variable in their carefully balanced equation of survival and mission success. As the meeting began, Sarah remained silent, listening to discussions about patrol routes, enemy positions, and communication protocols. Her training had prepared her for the technical aspects of the mission, but no classroom could replicate the complex social dynamics of earning respect from battle-hardened veterans. The mission briefing revealed the serious nature of their deployment. Intelligence suggested increased enemy activity in their assigned region, with reports of sophisticated ambush tactics and improvised explosive devices becoming more common. Every decision would carry weight, and every team member needed to perform flawlessly under pressure. Captain Williams outlined their objectives with clinical precision, his voice betraying no emotion as he described potential threats they might encounter. The room fell silent as satellite images flashed across the projector screen, showing the rugged terrain where they would soon find themselves fighting for survival. Sarah absorbed every detail, mentally preparing for the challenges ahead, while remaining acutely aware of the sideways glances from her new teammates. She knew that earning their respect would require more than just following orders and completing missions successfully. After the briefing concluded, small groups formed naturally as soldiers discussed equipment preferences and shared stories from previous deployments. Martinez found herself standing alone, excluded from conversations that might have included valuable insights about working effectively with her new unit. The isolation stung, but she had expected it. Breaking into established military units required patience, competence, and often a proving moment that demonstrated worthiness to skeptical colleagues. Sarah had no way of knowing that her opportunity to prove herself would come sooner than anyone anticipated. As the room emptied, she gathered her materials with deliberate care, refusing to show any sign of disappointment or frustration. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate her capabilities to men who seemed determined to find her lacking. The shooting range buzzed with activity as Bravo Company prepared for their final qualification tests before deployment. Desert heat shimmered off distant targets while soldiers checked their weapons and adjusted their gear. Sarah arrived early, hoping to familiarize herself with the range conditions before facing the scrutiny of her teammates. Sergeant Morrison stood near the ammunition station, his massive frame casting a shadow over boxes of cartridges. He watched Martinez approach with barely concealed skepticism, making no effort to offer assistance or friendly conversation. His silence spoke volumes about his expectations for her performance. Other team members gathered around various shooting positions, some joking about previous range experiences while others focused intensely on their equipment. The atmosphere carried an underlying tension, as everyone understood that poor performance here could predict deadly mistakes in combat situations. Captain Williams called the group to attention, explaining the qualification requirements in his characteristic monotone voice. Each soldier would need to demonstrate proficiency with multiple weapon systems under various conditions, including timed exercises and stress scenarios designed to simulate combat pressure. The first round of testing began with standard rifle marksmanship at distances ranging from 50 to 300 meters. Veterans moved through their positions with practiced efficiency, their movements fluid and confident after years of similar exercises. Sarah took her assigned lane, feeling the weight of multiple pairs of eyes watching her every move. Jackson positioned himself in the lane directly beside Martinez, making loud comments about proper shooting stances and breathing techniques. His commentary seemed designed more to rattle her concentration than to offer genuine assistance. But Sarah ignored the distractions and focused on her targets. When the signal came to begin firing, the range erupted with the sharp crack of rifle rounds. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and aligning her sights with mechanical precision. Her first shots found their marks with satisfying accuracy, but she knew that consistency would matter more than isolated good shots. Morrison walked behind the firing line, observing each shooter's technique and making notes on his clipboard. When he paused behind Martinez, she could feel his critical gaze examining her form, searching for flaws that might justify his doubts about her capabilities. The morning progressed through various exercises, each designed to test different aspects of marksmanship and weapon handling. Sarah performed well on most tasks, but she could sense that adequate performance would not be enough to convince these skeptical veterans of her worth as a team member. During a break between exercises, Chen approached Martinez with a bottle of water and genuine encouragement about her shooting. His kindness stood out sharply against the indifference or hostility she had encountered from most other team members, providing a brief respite from the constant evaluation. The afternoon brought more challenging scenarios, including rapid-fire exercises and shooting while wearing full combat gear. The added weight and restrictive movement tested everyone's adaptability, but Sarah had trained extensively under similar conditions and felt confident in her abilities. Jackson's performance began to suffer under the more demanding conditions, his shots grouping wider as fatigue set in, and equipment restrictions affected his usual techniques. He began making excuses about his rifle and the range conditions, drawing eye rolls from teammates who had known him long enough to recognize his patterns. Morrison noticed Jackson's declining performance but seemed more interested in watching. Martinez struggled with the heavy gear. When she adapted quickly and maintained her accuracy despite the additional challenges, his expression remained carefully neutral, refusing to acknowledge her competence. As the day's exercises concluded, soldiers compared their scores and discussed areas for improvement. Sarah had performed well overall, placing in the upper tier of the group's results, but she sensed that her teammates still viewed her as an unproven quantity, despite her demonstrated skills. The real test would come during the final exercise scheduled for the following week, a complex scenario designed to simulate actual combat conditions. This exercise would push everyone to their limits and reveal who could perform under the kind of pressure they would face in Afghanistan. Walking back to the barracks, Martinez overheard fragments of conversations about her performance. Some comments were grudgingly positive, acknowledging her technical skills while questioning whether she could maintain that level of performance under actual combat stress. That evening, she spent extra time cleaning and maintaining her weapons, knowing that equipment failures could provide ammunition for critics looking for reasons to doubt her readiness. Every detail mattered when trying to prove herself to men who seemed determined to find her lacking. The final combat simulation took place in a sprawling training facility designed to replicate urban warfare conditions. Mock buildings, narrow alleys, and hidden sniper positions created a maze of potential threats and tactical challenges. Sarah arrived before dawn, using the quiet morning hours to study the terrain and visualize possible scenarios. Other team members trickled in as the sun climbed higher, their faces showing the mix of anticipation and nervousness that preceded intensive training exercises. Today's performance would largely determine how prepared the unit was for actual deployment, making every decision and action critically important. Captain Williams gathered the team around a sand table model of the training area, explaining the complex scenario they would face. The exercise involved clearing a series of buildings while under simulated enemy fire, rescuing hostages, and establishing secure communication with headquarters. The scenario would test not only individual skills but also team coordination and communication under extreme pressure. Multiple evaluators would observe from hidden positions, scoring everything from tactical decisions to weapon handling and teamwork effectiveness. Morrison announced the team assignments, pairing experienced veterans with newer members in what appeared to be a logical distribution of expertise. However, Sarah noticed she had been assigned to work with Jackson and two other soldiers who had shown the most skepticism about her abilities. The assignment felt deliberate, designed to either prove her worth or expose her weaknesses under the most challenging possible conditions. Martinez accepted the placement without complaint, knowing that any protest would only confirm suspicions about her readiness for combat operations. As teams moved to their starting positions, Jackson took charge of their group with aggressive confidence. His plan involved rapid movement through the training area with minimal communication, relying on individual initiative rather than coordinated team tactics. Sarah suggested modifications to improve their coordination and reduce exposure to simulated enemy positions, but Jackson dismissed her input with barely disguised irritation. He made it clear that he intended to lead the exercise according to his experience rather than accommodate suggestions from unproven team members. The exercise began with the sharp blast of smoke, grenades, and the rattle of blank ammunition from hidden positions. Immediately, the training area filled with chaos as teams moved toward their objectives while evaluators simulated enemy resistance with laser tag equipment and pyrotechnic devices. Jackson's team advanced aggressively through the first series of obstacles, but their lack of coordination soon became apparent. Team members spread too far apart, communication broke down under pressure, and they failed to provide adequate cover for each other during movement. Martinez attempted to maintain proper spacing and communication protocols, but found herself increasingly isolated as other team members followed Jackson's example of individual action over team coordination. The situation deteriorated rapidly as simulated enemies engaged their scattered formation. When Jackson's aggressive approach led him directly into a simulated ambush, Sarah faced a crucial decision. She could follow orders and maintain her assigned position, or she could break from the plan to provide assistance that might save the exercise for their entire team. Without hesitation, Martinez moved to a flanking position that provided her with clear sight lines on the simulated enemy positions engaging Jackson. Her movement was smooth and deliberate, using available cover effectively while maintaining communication with other team members. From her new position, Sarah could see the full tactical situation clearly. The simulated enemies had positioned themselves to exploit Jackson's predictable advance, creating a crossfire that would eliminate the entire team, if not addressed immediately. Martinez engaged the simulated enemy positions with precise aimed fire, using her marksmanship skills to maximum advantage. Her shots were accurate and well-timed, forcing the role players to acknowledge hits and withdraw from their positions. According to exercise rules, the tactical situation shifted dramatically as Sarah's intervention eliminated the immediate threat and created opportunities for other team members to advance safely. Jackson, initially angry about her deviation from his plan, quickly recognized that her actions had prevented their team from failing the exercise completely. Other teams in the training area began experiencing similar challenges as the scenario intensified. The exercise designers had created situations that would test every aspect of combat readiness, from individual skills to unit cohesion under extreme pressure. As the exercise progressed, Martinez continued to demonstrate tactical awareness and shooting accuracy that exceeded the performance of several veteran team members. Her movements were calculated and effective, showing a level of combat understanding that surprised even her harshest critics. The morning's events established a new dynamic within the team as Sarah proved her ability to perform under pressure while maintaining situational awareness and tactical flexibility. Even Morrison, watching from his observation position, had to acknowledge the competence he witnessed. The afternoon phase of the combat simulation introduced new complexities that pushed every team member to their absolute limits. Smoke filled the training area as simulated explosions rocked buildings, creating an environment of controlled chaos that tested nerves and decision-making abilities under extreme stress. Martinez found herself separated from her original team when a simulated mortar attack forced everyone to take cover in different locations. The scenario was designed to break apart established units and force soldiers to work with whoever happened to be nearby, mimicking the unpredictable nature of actual combat. She took cover behind a concrete barrier alongside Chen and 2 soldiers from other teams, all breathing heavily as pyrotechnic devices continued exploding around their position. The communications specialist was trying to establish contact with headquarters, while the others assessed their tactical situation. Through the smoke and noise, Sarah could see movement in buildings across the training area. Simulated enemies were repositioning to take advantage of the scattered friendly forces, setting up ambushes and crossfires that would make advancing extremely dangerous without proper coordination. The soldier next to Martinez was showing signs of stress, his hands shaking slightly as he checked his equipment repeatedly. Combat simulations affected different people in various ways, and not everyone handled the pressure with equal composure under these intense conditions. Chen successfully established radio contact and learned that several teams had become pinned down by concentrated simulated enemy fire. The exercise controllers were pushing participants harder than usual, creating scenarios that required exceptional performance just to avoid complete failure. Sarah studied the tactical situation carefully, identifying patterns in enemy movement and noting potential weaknesses in their positions. Her training had included extensive instruction in tactical analysis, but applying that knowledge under simulated combat pressure required a different level of mental discipline. When she proposed a flanking maneuver that could relieve pressure on the pinned-down teams, the other soldiers initially hesitated. Martinez was still relatively unknown to most of them, and following her tactical suggestions required a level of trust that had not yet been established. However, the deteriorating situation left them with limited options. Staying in their current position would eventually result in simulated elimination, as enemy forces closed in from multiple directions. Taking action based on Martinez's plan offered their best chance for successful completion of the exercise. The group moved out in tactical formation, with Sarah leading the way through a series of obstacles that provided concealment from enemy observation posts. Her route selection showed intimate knowledge of the training area layout and understanding of sightlines that impressed her temporary teammates. As they advanced, Martinez demonstrated fieldcraft skills that went beyond basic training requirements. She read terrain effectively, anticipated enemy reactions, and positioned the small team to maximize their tactical advantages while minimizing exposure to simulated hostile fire. The flanking movement succeeded beyond expectations, allowing them to engage simulated enemy positions from an unexpected direction. Sarah's marksmanship proved decisive as she eliminated multiple targets with quick, accurate shots that forced role players to acknowledge their simulated casualties. The tactical success created opportunities for other teams to advance and complete their assigned objectives. Radio communications buzzed with reports of progress as the tide of the exercise shifted in favor of the friendly forces. Largely due to Martinez's initiative and tactical acumen, Morrison, observing from his concealed position, watched these developments with growing interest. The woman he had dismissed as inexperienced was demonstrating combat leadership and technical skills that exceeded those of several soldiers with multiple combat deployments. Other evaluators took notice as well, making notes about Martinez's performance that would become part of her permanent military record. Outstanding performance in realistic training exercises carried significant weight when assessing readiness for actual combat operations. As the exercise entered its final phase, Sarah had established herself as a capable and reliable team member who could be trusted to make sound decisions under pressure. The skepticism that had greeted her arrival was beginning to give way to grudging respect from veterans who had initially doubted her abilities. The transformation was not complete, but momentum was shifting in her favor as word spread about her performance throughout the training area. Soldiers who had not worked directly with Martinez heard reports from those who had witnessed her tactical skills and shooting accuracy firsthand. Jackson, whose initial hostility had been most pronounced, found himself reconsidering his assessment of the new team member. Her actions during the exercise had prevented his team from failing completely, and her tactical suggestions had proven sound, despite his initial resistance to following her recommendations. The exercise concluded with a formal debriefing session, where evaluators would review team performance and individual contributions. Soldiers gathered in the briefing room, their uniforms still dusty from the morning's activities, faces showing the fatigue that came with hours of intense concentration and physical exertion. Captain Williams opened the session by acknowledging the challenging nature of the scenario and the overall performance of the unit. His measured tone gave little indication of how individuals had performed, leaving everyone uncertain about their evaluation results until detailed scores were announced. Evaluators began presenting their observations, starting with tactical decisions made by team leaders and working through specific examples of effective coordination and communication. The feedback was detailed and technical, focusing on lessons learned rather than simple pass or fail assessments. Martinez sat quietly, listening to critiques of various tactical approaches while trying to gauge reactions from her teammates. Some soldiers received praise for specific actions, while others were counseled about areas needing improvement before deployment. Morrison stepped forward to present his assessment of individual performance, his clipboard containing detailed notes about every soldier's contributions during the exercise. His reputation for fair but demanding evaluation made his feedback particularly significant for career, advancement, and team assignment decisions. He began with veterans whose performance had met expected standards, offering brief but positive comments about their readiness for deployment. Jackson received mixed feedback, with praise for his initiative balanced by criticism of his coordination and communication during critical moments. When Morrison reached Martinez's name, the room fell noticeably quiet. Everyone knew this evaluation would be particularly important, as it would largely determine whether she would be accepted as a full team member or remain an outsider within the unit structure. The sergeant's assessment began with technical observations about her marksmanship and tactical movement, noting accuracy levels and decision-making under pressure that exceeded minimum requirements. His tone remained professionally neutral, but the content of his feedback was unmistakably positive. Morrison continued by describing specific moments when Martinez's actions had influenced the exercise outcome, including her flanking maneuver that had relieved pressure on multiple pinned-down teams. He noted her ability to adapt to changing situations and work effectively with different team combinations. The evaluation concluded with Morrison's recommendation that Martinez be approved for deployment with full confidence in her combat readiness. Coming from someone known for demanding standards, this endorsement carried considerable weight with other unit members. Other evaluators added their observations, consistently highlighting Sarah's tactical awareness, technical skills, and ability to maintain composure under simulated combat stress. The consensus was clear that she had performed at or above the level expected of experienced soldiers. Captain Williams summarized the overall exercise results, noting improvements needed in team communication and coordination, while acknowledging individual performances that had exceeded expectations. The unit would deploy as scheduled, with all members meeting required standards for combat operations. As the formal session concluded, individual soldiers approached Martinez with comments ranging from grudging acknowledgement to genuine congratulations on her performance. The atmosphere had shifted noticeably from the skepticism that had greeted her arrival just weeks earlier. Jackson was among those who offered recognition, admitting that her tactical intervention had prevented his team from failing the exercise. His acknowledgement was particularly significant, given his initial vocal opposition to her inclusion in the unit. Chen expressed his satisfaction at having worked with someone who demonstrated both technical competence and tactical intelligence under pressure. His positive experience working with Martinez during the exercise had confirmed his initial favorable impression of her abilities. Even Morrison approached her after the debriefing, offering professional recognition for performance that had impressed experienced evaluators. His feedback carried special weight because of his reputation for honest assessment regardless of personal feelings or unit politics. The successful completion of the exercise marked a turning point in Sarah's integration with Bravo Company. While not every team member had been completely won over, she had established credibility as someone who could be trusted to perform effectively under combat conditions. Most importantly, she had demonstrated the tactical awareness and technical skills that would be essential for survival and mission success in Afghanistan. The simulation had provided a realistic preview of challenges they would face, and Martinez had proven her readiness to meet those challenges alongside her teammates. 3 days before deployment, Colonel Harrison arrived at Fort Bragg for his final inspection of Bravo Company. The distinguished officer commanded respect through decades of service and multiple combat commands, his presence bringing an extra level of intensity to the already heightened pre-deployment atmosphere. Sarah had heard stories about Colonel Harrison's reputation for thorough preparation and attention to detail. He was known for personally reviewing the records of soldiers under his command, particularly those in specialized units heading to combat zones where individual performance could determine mission success or failure. The colonel began his inspection by meeting with Captain Williams to review unit readiness and discuss any concerns about personnel or equipment. These private discussions often influenced final deployment decisions, making them crucial for soldiers whose positions in the unit were still being evaluated. Morrison had prepared comprehensive files on every team member, including detailed training records, evaluation scores, and personal observations about combat readiness. These documents would provide Colonel Harrison with the information needed to make informed decisions about the unit's deployment roster. The inspection process included individual meetings with selected soldiers, allowing the colonel to assess their mental preparation and address any concerns about the upcoming mission. Sarah knew she would likely be among those called for individual evaluation, given her recent addition to the unit. When her name was called, Martinez reported to the temporary office where Colonel Harrison conducted his interviews. The room was sparse but professional, with maps of Afghanistan covering one wall and communication equipment arranged on a metal desk. Colonel Harrison greeted her with the professional courtesy expected in military settings, but his eyes showed the sharp intelligence that had made him successful in multiple combat commands. He gestured for her to take a seat while he reviewed documents spread across his desk. The colonel's first questions focused on her training background and motivation for requesting assignment to a combat unit. His inquiries were direct and thorough, designed to assess both her technical qualifications and psychological readiness for the challenges ahead. Martinez answered honestly and completely, describing her preparation process and acknowledging the skepticism she had encountered from some team members. She explained her determination to prove herself through performance rather than simply requesting acceptance based on credentials alone. Colonel Harrison listened without interruption, occasionally making notes while maintaining steady eye contact that made clear his complete attention to her responses. His evaluation would carry decisive weight in determining her final assignment status with the unit. After completing his initial questions, the colonel reached for a particular file that had been separated from the others on his desk. The document appeared to contain recent performance evaluations and training scores, including results from the combat simulation exercise. Harrison opened the file and studied its contents carefully, his expression remaining neutral as he reviewed detailed assessments from multiple evaluators. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Martinez waited for him to complete his analysis of her documented performance. Finally, the colonel looked up and fixed her with a direct stare that seemed to see through any pretense or uncertainty. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected lives and mission outcomes. He informed Martinez that her simulation scores had caught his attention, particularly her marksmanship results, which had exceeded those of several veteran soldiers in the unit. The numbers told a story of exceptional performance under pressure that aligned with the reports he had received from training evaluators. Colonel Harrison then revealed the specific score that had prompted his personal attention, a number that represented the highest marksmanship accuracy achieved during the simulation exercise. The result was remarkable, enough to warrant investigation and personal verification. From the commanding officer, the colonel explained that such performance levels were typically associated with soldiers who had received specialized training, or had extensive combat experience. Martinez's achievement as a relatively new team member was unusual enough to raise questions about her background and preparation methods. When pressed for explanation, Sarah described her dedicated training routine and natural aptitude for marksmanship that had been recognized and developed throughout her military career. She emphasized the countless hours of practice that had prepared her for exactly the kind of challenges she had faced during the simulation. Colonel Harrison's demeanor shifted noticeably as he processed her explanation and compared it with the documented evidence of her performance. The combination of exceptional results and professional presentation convinced him that Martinez represented a valuable addition to the combat team. The interview concluded with the colonel's endorsement of her deployment status and a personal commitment to monitor her performance in Afghanistan. His support effectively silenced any remaining skepticism within the unit and established her credibility with veterans who had questioned her readiness for combat operations. When word spread about Colonel Harrison's evaluation and the scores that had impressed him, the last barriers to Sarah's acceptance within Bravo Company finally crumbled, replaced by recognition and respect from teammates who now understood her true capabilities.